The Conference of the Birds, written by Attar, is a journey, and it is the journey of the being to the divine. And in the book, all the birds of the world gather together and they want a king. That's what the Simurgh is the king. And the king, of course, represents, the divine. And there's a guide. We call him Hoopoe in English. In Arabic and Persian, it's the hudhud is the name of the bird. It's a fascinating little bird, very pretty. It's a long, curved beak and nice plumage,
We
big
actually
crest.
got to see one in India, didn't we?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
saw a hoopoe in India, and it was very fortuitous. Um, so the bird starts out, the hoopoe starts out taking these people on a journey, and the journey takes place in seven valleys. And the first valley is the Valley of Love. And this poem takes place in the second valley, which is the Valley of Knowledge and the Mysteries. And this poem takes you to one of the core mysteries.
All right, my name is Jeremiah. You're on Infinite. This is a platform where you're gonna see me talking to smart folks. We have Mushtaq Ali and Noor from the Nine-Sided Circle. We'll go ahead and we're gonna have a conversation today about the Conference of the Birds by Farad Uddin Attar. This particular story is called A Watchman in Love. It's a fantastic story. Let me give you a little context of what's going on. So right now in the story is, or let's put it like this: there's about a few birds who've come together, and they're on a journey to find what's called the Samord. Um, you'd have to read the book to find out more. And this is just one short story within that giant story. So I'm gonna go ahead and read that short story now. Uh, like I said, it's called A Watchman in Love. A watchman fell in love, the poor man kept. Love's vigil day and night and never slept. A friend reproved this lover. Sleep, he cried. Sleep for one moment. But the man replied, I am a lover and a watchman. How could I know sleep and break this double vow? How can a watchman sleep, especially a wretched watchman who's in love like me? My earthly duties and my love unite to ward off sleep throughout the longest night. There's no sleep in me. Can I ask a friend? For sleep is not a substance you can lend. Each night, love puts his watchman to the test, watching to see how the watchman has no rest, beating a drum as if to walk to wake the dead, or slapping me about the face and head. And if I slept a moment, sleepless love would raise a tumult to the skies above. His friend said, but you never even blink. All night you burn and cannot sleep a wink. He answered him, a watchman never sleeps. He knows no water but the tears he weeps. A watchman's duty is to stay awake, and lovers parch with thirst for passion's sake. Since lovers' eyes are filled with flowing tears, sweet sleep is driven out and disappears. A lover and a watchman should agree, since neither sleeps through all eternity. Love helps the watchman's vigilance. Its pain will banish slumber from his fevered brain. Shun sleep, if you would be the centennial. Though if your vigil is mere talk, sleep well. Pace the hard streets. Thieves lurk in ambush there, waiting for you to waver in your care. But as you scan the darkness, you will find new love and insight wake within your mind. The man who suffers will watch and wait, is given insight by his sleepless state. And sleepless night enables him to bring a tried and wakeful heart before his king. Since sleepless watches nourish vigilance, sleep little, guard your heart with diligence. What shall I say? What words have ever found a means to save the sinking you are drowned? Beloved's journey on before us all. Intoxicated by their love, they fall. Strive, drink as they have drunk, discover love, the key to this world and the world above. A woman will become a man a sea whose depths no mortal mind may scan. Abbassade told a wondering scholar once, the man who's kindled by love's radiance will give birth to a woman. When love's fire quickens within a woman this desire, she gives birth to a man. Is it denied that Adam bore a woman from his side, that Mary bore a woman until this light shines out? Such truths are hidden from your sight. But when its glory comes, you will receive blessings far greater than you can conceive. Count this as wealth. Here is the faith you need. But if the world's base glory is your creed, your soul is lost. Seek the wealth insight gives. In insight, our eternal kingdom lives. Whoever drinks the mystic's wine is king of all the world can show, of everything. Its realms are specks of his authority, the heavens but a ship on his wide sea. If all the sultans of the world could know that shoreless sea is mighty ebb and flow, they'd sit and mourn their wretched impotence, with eyes ashamed to meet each other's glance. All right, that's it. What do you guys think? What do you
Thank you
guys
so
think?
much for reading for us, Jeremiah.
Yeah.
No problem.
So to understand this, you have to understand the context of the Conference of the Birds. So I think if you don't mind, we can run that down real quick.
Yeah, I
Please,
think that's important. Let's do that.
yeah, please.
So the Conference of the Birds, written by Attar, is a journey, and it is the journey of the being to the divine. And in the book, all the birds of the world gather together and they want a king. That's what the Simach is the king. And the king, of course, represents, the divine. And there's a guide. We call him Hupo in English. In Arabic and Persian, it's the hudhud is the name of the bird. It's a fascinating little bird, very pretty. It's a long, curved beak and nice plumage,
We
big
actually
crest.
got to see one in India, didn't we?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
saw a hoopoe in India, and it was very fortuitous. Uh, so the bird starts out, the hoopoe starts out taking these people on a journey, and the journey takes place in seven valleys. And the first valley is the Valley of Love. And this poem takes place in the second valley, which is the Valley of Knowledge and the Mysteries. And this poem takes you to one of the core mysteries. And not to be a spoiler, but after going through these seven valleys, and lots of birds fall off, either they get fascinated by the valley they're in, or they die, or they get bored and go home. You are left with just 30 birds at the end, and they get to meet the Simach. And I'm not going to tell you how that turns out because that would be the ultimate spoiler. People are going
Yeah,
to need to read the book.
It's
And it's
important. Yeah.
yeah, and it's easy to get copies of this book. There are many translations that are free for the taking in the public domain. The Internet Archive has one or two that are worth reading, and I can send you the links to that
yeah,
uh, so that people can just download the book and read it.
yep. Perfect. All
Uh,
right,
so
great.
that's the context.
Uh-huh.
The birds have gotten to the second valley, so there's still a bunch of them. They haven't culled the flock yet. And within each of these, the hoopoe basically busts their chops about their egos in various different ways. And then he tells them stories. And this is one of the stories.
Yep.
And I think it's incredibly important because it touches on something. And the thing that it touches on is the need to be awake. That is the constant refrain in this poem. And Um, it is a poem. The entire book is one long poem.
Yeah, this was in Persian
Persian, yeah.
originally. Yeah.
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 Yeah. And remember, we used to have Zainab read it to us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. The the whole thing is about being wakeful, the correlation between being a watcher and being in love and the pain that comes from. Why do you guys think uh, is it the absence of the beloved that causes the pain that keeps?
Absence of the beloved can definitely cause the pain, but it's deeper than that.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Noor, but
Are you gonna?
I'm going to talk about us.
We may as well. It's
Yeah.
part of it. I mean, how better to talk about these things than to talk from experience, right?
Yeah.
So feel free.
So, Noor, aside from being my wife, is my beloved. And I understand what the Watchman is talking about because my mind focuses on her. It's like she is never out of my mind. And that means that when I go to the store, I will ask myself, what kind of treat could I get for her? Um, I am sensitive to her needs and her wants and just to her presence.
Yeah. Yeah. And to each other's, states, whatever state is passing through, we tend to be not necessarily in a psychic way, but we are attuned to noticing those subtleties in each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so to focus on the beloved is a good practice. And the ultimate beloved is God.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's um, in Arabic, they say that the translation is God is love, God is lover, God is beloved.
Yeah. 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 Okay.
Yeah.
That makes
And
sense.
when I mean, there's this interesting tidbit in what you've said, Mushtaq, that this is not just about human beings, right?
No,
So we can
no,
keep that in the back of our minds as well.
yeah. My having a physical beloved is just practice for understanding how to have the divine as beloved. This is a reflection of that.
Mm. And perhaps thinking about, the beloved as lover, meaning the
Yeah.
divine beloved as lover.
Yeah. 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 And it kind of gets into that when it towards the end, it seems to me, and I want to know what you guys think, when it uses phrases, when it describes the insight that gains um, from waiting in the sleepless night, in that sleepless state, you eventually gain the insight to understand the eternal kingdom, which understands that its realms are are specks of his authority, the heavens but a ship on his wide sea. Um, Understanding the shoreless sea. It's like it's pointing to the beloved in his undescribableness. It's
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
is
And
using it
it's giving you
against
a
you.
practice.
Mm,
That's one of the things about the Conference of the Birds is that there are practices hidden within the poem, things to do. And in this practice, it's the night vigil, which
mhm,
is something Sufis like to do. As a matter of fact, it's the reason that coffee became popular.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Coffee came from Ethiopia and went to Yemen, where Sufis discovered it and went, oh, wow, we can use this to stay awake during the night vigil.
hmm yeah, 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 yeah. That reminds me of the story of Amir Abdel Kadir. Have you guys heard of him? The
Yeah,
Algerian, yeah, yeah. So
yeah.
he was an Algerian leader um, during against their war against the French. But there was he had a French captive
Mm.
And he took great care of his captives, according to a lot of the French captives who came back home. And he actually had one fellow who was sick. He actually stayed in his tent, and he was talking about how he woke up in the middle of his fever, and he saw Amir Abdelkader doing immense. He didn't know how to describe it as a Christian, but he pretty much said he saw him doing prayers, and when he looked upon him, he was like, "This is clearly what the saints that we in Christianity refer to." He's clearly someone who's a saint late at night praying. Um, and going back to the coffee thing, he also drank a lot of coffee as well. He made it a point not to get addicted, but he also drank coffee as well. So yeah, yeah, completely
Wise.
agree.
Yeah.
So let me ask you guys a question. This is something that I want to get to the part that I don't fully understand.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's.
so when it says that, of course, but as you scan the darkness, you will find new love and insight wake within your mind. Okay, I'll comprehend that. The man who suffers, who will watch and wait, is given insight by his sleepless state. Now, it appears to me that the insight is talking about is the key to this world and the world above. It says, a woman will become a man of sea whose depths no mortal mind may scan. Uh, is that like some sort of it kind of goes on from there a little bit more, but is that
Yeah.
like some sort of transformation that you guys are thinking?
I mean, I think there's a couple layers to this.
Yeah.
I think there is, some touching in on, alchemy and the
Yeah.
metaphysical, but I do think there is, a dash of it being the times,
Hmm.
where we have this sense of dichotomization between man and woman and all of that. And
Yeah. Yeah, that's
you
what I
know,
was, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking at first as well. And it also adds on. So I don't know, because when he continues, it says Abbassé. Hopefully you guys can tell me who that is. I don't know who, I don't know if you guys know who Abbassé is, but Abbassé told a wandering scholar once, the man who's kindled by love's radiance will give birth to a woman. When love's fire quickens within a woman, this desire she gives birth to a man. Is it denied that Adam bore a woman from his side, that Mary bore a man? I'm not. I originally thought the same thing of it potentially being some sort of a um, patriarchal disrespect towards women, but
mm.
I don't know
It,
exactly if
yeah.
that's the
It's
yeah
actually to counter the patriarchal disrespect towards women.
When I
yeah
first read it, I had the same reaction,
Yeah.
hmm
like that. It starts by saying, you know, uh, of course, we have those mm, little twinges that can hit us these days because we're so sensitive to these things about
yeah
uh patriarchalism and misogyny. But now that I've read this multiple times, I do think this is counter to that.
Yeah.
yeah
We see both in the Gnostic writings after Christianity and in a lot of Sufi writings, the idea of, okay, yeah, men and women are separate. But when a woman gets onto this path, she becomes a man, which is
Mm,
saying to them, look, she's equal to you
hmm.
yeah.
when it comes right down to it.
And then it says, but that same transformation in a man creates this turning into a woman, right?
Yeah,
And oh no, what does that mean? That's going to freak people out who are reading this, who are coming from this patriarchal point of view. Like, isn't
yeah,
that becoming lesser? And and yet we see that there is this usage of this dichotomy to create a sense of parity.
hmm. What do you mean by that?
Well, we are saying here they're using the two aspects of this change, the man who's kindled by love's radiance will give birth to a woman.
Yeah.
When love's fire quickens within a woman this desire, this
She
same
gives birth.
thing,
Yeah.
she gives birth to a man. And then it says, is it denied that Adam bore a woman from his side?
Yeah.
He created this, this magnificent thing that happened to be a woman. And Mary created this magnificent thing that had happened to be a man. And it's speaking to this idea that is there Adam is this figure who has a lot of weight in these religious traditions, right? He is the original human being, and it would be, from this patriarchal point of view, wouldn't it be beneath him to create something that is not worthy of him, let's
Yeah.
say?
Yeah.
And, on the flip side, Mary, she's just a woman, quote unquote.
Hmm.
And yet she bore Jesus, who we
Yeah.
may consider either the Son of God or a magnificent prophet who has
Mhm.
had either way an incredible impact on humanity and as the world as a whole. And yet
Yeah.
he came from a mere woman.
Mhm.
So this is really, as it says, it's pointing to something.
Yeah. I completely agree. Yeah, I think so. And especially when the emphasis on Adam bearing a woman from his side and Mary bearing Christ. I've never correlated those two before, but I could kind of see if I look at it from an angle, there is something there um, with um, with Adam. Well, it's kind of interesting because Adam was put to sleep when Eve was pulled out of his side, which kind
Mhm.
of brings us back to the watchfulness. Um, it really makes me think because Adam typically, or sometimes called Adam Cadman, is thought of in a lot of theological circles as being something more like a hermaphrodite before Eve was pulled from his side. And so
Interesting.
yeah, so
Yeah,
he was,
that's a common idea amongst the Gnostics.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And beforehand, he kind of was at this state of, I don't want to say perfection, but he was maybe at a higher state. And then once Eve was pulled from his side, once God saw that he needed a helpmeet, um, maybe a way to look at it is it was like a form of division. It was the first step into the fall. Um, and it seems like Mary is the flip side of that. Coming from a Christian perspective, Christ is the answer to the fall. Christ would be her giving birth to a man is it would be I'm not exactly sure how to put it, but I mean, there was no doubt about it. When she was with the angel Gabriel, she was not asleep like Adam was when the fall began. She was awake. She was awake when she gave birth to Christ. And it was the answer to that. What do you guys think about that? Do you see anything there, or am I kind of pulling at straws a bit here?
I mean, I
Um,
think that's
yeah.
yeah, I mean, we're coming from a more Islamic point of view or
Yeah, yeah,
experience. And yet, within the context of the Christian experience, I feel like that's a really interesting take, a really interesting observation. And there's
yeah.
nothing to discount about that.
Mhm.
It definitely offers some some metaphysical things to chew on?
Yeah, yeah, yep,
Yeah.
yep, yep.
And
So go ahead.
I was just going to say, as I read this more times, I'm almost reading it, we're kind of like skipping to the metaphysical, but as I read it, I'm also thinking of the literal, right? Like when we make love, right? The result of a man making love is magical in that it doesn't create a clone of a man, right? it can create a girl, a woman.
Hmm. Hmm.
And same thing with a woman. She doesn't create a clone woman. She
Hmm.
can give birth to a man. So
Yeah.
that's, it seems mundane, and yet there is something pretty magical about that in and of itself. And then we add this layer of the Gnostic and the transformational, where the the other is always present
Hmm.
in what's that? How do I want to phrase that? The dualities come together in unity. They are not actually separate.
Yeah. And I think you're exactly right. Because as we're having this conversation, it's kind of it's kind of making it a little bit clear. It seems like because it seems like the key to this, the center to this, like it seems like there's two halves to it. The first half being a watcher and in love, and the second half speaking on um, the insight that gains from being a watcher. And the key to it, like it
Mm.
says, the key to this world and the world above. It seems like the desire, where it says that uh, this desire, she gives birth to a man. The desire specifically seems to also be the key because it seems like a woman desiring a man, then it makes her a man, quote unquote, but more in a literal sense. A man, a sea whose depths no mortal mind may scan. It's like in the desire itself, not to jump to the end of the conference of the birds, it makes us, I don't want to spoil it, never mind. But in the desire itself, we end up becoming what we're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you brought my attention to this part about a woman will become a man who's a man, a sea whose depths no mortal mind can scan. I personally, I do feel a twinge of the patriarchal there, but
Hmm.
then I think, as you mentioned, when you sit in meditation and you really dig deeper into these things, that's when things like uh what comes after that become revealed to us. We go deeper. We see past those cultural norms that prevent us from seeing the truth, right?
Yeah, yeah. It seems like an analogy to something like an analogy. Analogies are typically um, for the context of a specific time, for the people in that time to understand it. But then there's usually a deeper meaning that transcends that time. And the deeper meaning does seem to be that the watcher, through his desire, through his observation, through keeping his gaze on the beloved, he ends up, I want to be careful saying becoming because I want to be careful saying that. But I do, that's what it seems to be pointing at to me. Do you think that's what it's pointing at, or
I mean, yeah. And again, as I'm reading this again,
Mhm.
the key to this world and the world above, a woman will become a man who a sea whose depths no mortal mind may scan. If we're
Mhm.
talking about a heterosexual male
Mhm.
lover, watchman, um, fixated or watching or just like meditating on the beloved, who in this case would be a woman,
Yeah.
he may be thinking about how he will never fully know her because she is a universe unto herself.
Mhm.
And I know Mushtaq and I talk about this a lot, where we discuss the part of truly loving someone is being able to witness them as being a universe unto themselves. And so, in this, putting myself in the mind of a watchman, a lover, a man at the time this poem was written,
Yeah.
reflecting on the nature of my beloved, that there is so much more to her than I know, that she is just as complicated and wondrous as I am,
Mhm.
a man.
Yeah.
She's just like me, and I will never fully be able to know her mind and know her, and that adds to my love for her.
Yep. Yeah. And that is the importance, it seems, of the vigilance of staying awake and not falling asleep and not being convinced that you comprehend, in this analogy, her. Um, because you really don't. You know, it reminds me of I forget where this came from. I'm sure you guys will probably know, but it reminds me of that concept of someone who has to keep their eyes on the stars, but also keep their eyes on the ground so they don't trip on the rocks ahead of them, right? And you can
I
kind of
think
see
it's
it
a
in,
good idea.
yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah, because you keep looking up, you'll fall. But it seems like oftentimes we are constantly looking at the rocks, but we don't keep our eyes up to the stars as well. And then that's part of the reason. Like it's direct correlation between attention, desire, and in a sense, then becoming. I think that might be the root. I don't want to say it's the root, like I fully understand it, but I think that might be a central idea in this story here. You know,
I agree. Um, I think there's this sense of we're not just scanning, we're looking deeper. We are watching deeper. And that's not just at the superficialities of the detritus in front of us. But as you mentioned, looking up to the stars and seeing what is beyond what we can immediately perceive.
yep, yep, I completely agree.
Yeah. What's coming up for you, Mushtaq? What's on your mind?
I agree with everything you said.
Yep, that's perfect.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you look at the Torah and Genesis, there are two different creation stories there. And the first one um, basically says, and on the sixth day, God created man, male and female, he created them. Boom, right there. You have male and female. And then in the next creation story, uh, which is a little bit younger, it goes into Adam and Eve and the garden and all of this. And I think it's a very important story, but often not for the reasons that people think. From a Sufi perspective, there never was a fall. It was a setup. Because what did we get from eating the fruit?
Knowledge,
Knowledge of what?
good and evil,
Yes. And what is that?
uh, aware, insight into duality,
It's also conscience.
conscious. Yes, like yeah,
Yeah. Before the fruit, Adam and Eve had no conscience. Humanity had no conscience, no
yeah,
sense of the other as subject. They eat the fruit, they develop conscience.
yeah,
And 4,000, however many centuries later, you have Jesus. And what does Jesus bring? What is his fulfilling? I mean, forget about the bullshit of he died for our sins because the Gospels don't say that.
hot takes.
Yeah. Yeah, that was something that Paul invented.
Mhm.
Um, And it's pretty clear that that's the case if you actually read the Gospels.
Yeah.
But what did Jesus fulfill? What was the fulfillment of his message?
I know that they say that he fulfilled the law, but in his actions, he gave us an example to follow. Not just an example, but a specific, I don't want to use the word archetype, but in his actions, he showed us the the way,
The way to what?
the smorg,
That's it. That's it. Let me ask you again, the way to what? What
the
actions
way,
did he teach us? Did you know that
sacrifice.
yeah, not sacrifice, no,
No?
no.
Okay.
Again, that's the Paulian thing.
Okay.
Did you know that Muslims like Jesus a lot?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's referred to more in the Quran than Muhammad is.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he was very important in the Quran because of where he stands. But he fulfilled conscience, conscience through love. There is the passage. The rich man comes to Jesus and says, what do I have to do to have the kingdom? And Jesus says, follow the law. And the man says, but I follow the law. What of the law is most important? And Jesus says, the most important commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your mind and with all your soul. And the second is like unto it to love your neighbor as yourself. That is an instruction right there to develop your conscience and live by it.
Mhm.
You know, to love your neighbor as yourself is an ultimate act of conscience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
An awareness. Yeah.
yeah, so from our point of view, Jesus brought that love into the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
He gave a demonstrated example of
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a question because I believe I've heard a few fathers, church fathers, talk about, and this is of course not canonical, but they've talked about how Adam and Eve were eventually going to be given the fruit in time, but it was like they reached out to grab the fruit for themselves, the consciousness for themselves, before it was ready, before it was ripe, before it was uh, prepared. What do you guys think about that?
It's possible,
Hmm.
but I still think it's a setup. I think God said, hey, serpent, go down there, convince that
Yeah,
woman to eat the fruit,
yeah.
convince her to give it to her boyfriend.
Mhm.
And it's
Yeah,
an interesting speculation.
yeah, without a doubt. Yeah. And that consciousness is the wakefulness that's talked
Yeah.
about here. It's
And
that
and that conscience is seeing the other as subject. And that is what this poem talks about, seeing the other as subject. To look at that other being, and as Noor said, realize there's a universe within them, and to experience that, and to act in such a way that you respect that universe.
That's the next big challenge
Yeah.
is now
And
you know that. What do you do with it? Yeah.
yeah, and the world has suffered mightily from not doing that.
Both in not seeing it and not acting, with the right action in response to that knowing.
let's see. So you're saying that that conscience, that awareness uh, recognizing the other, the other. When you say subject, do you mean like as yourself? Like
Yeah,
yes, okay,
yeah,
As in
okay,
I, like
yeah,
I am. Yeah.
yeah, as
yeah,
opposed to an object, which
of
is
course,
what
yeah,
the unawakened do. The
exactly.
unawakened treat the other as object.
Mhm.
And that's how we get 99% of all of the evil in the world, probably more than that.
Yeah, yeah.
Abuse, enslavement, murder, all of those things.
So
Yeah.
that leads me to an interesting, like as you're saying this, it's making me think that do you think that when it says a man becomes a woman, another way of looking at it as being not necessarily uh, a transformation of identity, but more of a transformation of recognition that whatever I really am, not Jeremiah, not whatever the case may be, is also in a woman, is also in a seed that is too large for a mind to scan. Do you think that that's kind of also where it's headed as well?
I think that you're onto something there. Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
not be surprised if it is a, you know, a narrative, a poem that is trying to walk us towards that realization that you just made
yeah.
using incremental steps
Hmm.
because it is so hard to grasp these things by being told.
Yeah, yeah.
We need to own it for ourselves.
Mhm. That's fantastic. All right, well, I think that that's pretty great. Yeah, so these conversations are really just going to be kind of, I like to think of it as like my own personal, I guess you could say public digital logs of conversations I have with great folks like Mushtaq Ali and Noor of the Nine-Sided Circle. A link to their YouTube will be below. A link of the Conference of the Birds will also be below. Do you guys have anything to say before we wrap everything up?
I
This was
just want
great.
to, yes,
Yeah.
thank you so much for the invitation to chat with you. It's such a nice change of pace from the group things we usually do. Just having like a dedicated discussion and digging deep. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Oh yeah, I really appreciate it. I mean, this is my first one. I appreciate you guys for hopping on here. This was a great conversation because I remember reading this particular story and not understanding it at all. I feel like I've kind of uh, got understood it a little bit better because you guys, and I appreciate that.
Likewise, thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Right.